there's two things to consider on this. The first one is that from a metaphysical aspect, it very much helps us if we understand that we exist as multidimensional beings. And I always, particularly at conferences, emphasize this. It's a very, very important point, and a lot of things begin with this knowledge. We don't just exist in one place at one time. We exist in several places at several times. And as soon as you go out of the third density, up, so to speak, then even time ceases to be quite the thing it was. And that temporality shifts. And as soon as you start messing with time, then a lot of what we call paranormal phenomena become very simple. So if you can pause time and travel from New York to Los Angeles and then unpause time, it looks like you've just done something phenomenal. It looks like you've teleported. If you can take a message into the field and go directly to the person who needs to see that or hear that message, then again, that's like clairaudience, or see it, clairvoyance. And if you want to go and take a look at something, as the military have been doing for about 100 years now, as a remote viewer, what you're essentially doing is shifting the frequency of your consciousness into a fourth density state and quieting the mind in the same way that a yogi or a monk would do, and reducing that static. Because when you do that, that link that is always there begins to activate. You don't have to establish the link, it's already established. What we have to do is turn down the static so we can hear it. And as you say, we tend to confuse that with actual physical hearing, like the cochlear apparatus inside our ear. It's not like that. It sometimes presents itself as an inner voice, but sometimes just as a thought form or a dialogue. What it really is a spontaneous connection, a spontaneous field uplink, I would call it, to that fourth density state. And in that hypnagogic state, just before you drop off to sleep, that's when the mind is at its quietest, because it's just about to shift gear and start doing something different, or completely, shift down altogether. But when it's in neutral, regardless of where it's going to go next, when it's in neutral, the static reduces. And when that reduces, we can hear the vibrations, if you like, from the higher self. And depending on who you are, that presents itself as visuals or thoughts or dreams or visions or voices or whatever. But actually, what it is you're just opening up a higher set of perceptive apparatus. You're opening up a higher frequency of perception. And it's very normal, it's very organic, everybody can do it. But because it's so outside the mainstream construct, because it's so unusual and it's so scary to the people who want to keep humans contained, it's just turned into fiction, really, and it's scoffed at in the mainstream, and academia scoff at it even now. And so even talking about these matters, if you go to certain gatherings, people talk about celestial beings and light beings and draconians and elves and goblins and stuff. And I can sometimes, imagine if I just pulled in someone off the street and stood them next to me to hear this, they would think they'd gone to another planet in another era and just think, what the hell, elves? Did you say elves then? I thought you said elves, and would just think, oh my gosh, this is crazy. It's a cult, something strange is going on. And that's how massive and profound the conditioning is in that third density state. So to take people into a wider world, to appreciate that there is much more going on, the only way you can do it is experientially, is to bring them that shift of consciousness. And there's a lot of debate on the best ways to do this, to do it chemically with psychedelics, entheogens, sacred plants, sacraments, whatever you want to call it, to do it with chemicals, or to do it without chemicals. And those are essentially the two methods. And within each, there are many, many subsets and many, many paths to go. And always, it depends on the individual. Like, some people don't like to drink wine, never touch it. Some people love wine, some people like red meat, some people, it's a horror story that they will only eat vegetables. It's a very personal thing. It depends on your body, your mind, your culture, your background, everything. The point is, however, that there are many different ways to do this, and I discussed this in the workshop very briefly, and we only had 3 hours to play with, so we couldn't go into an enormous amount of detail. But we said, there is meditation and hypnosis, dance, near-death experiences. The Europeans and North Americans would practice exposure by putting people in the wilderness to change the consciousness. And of course, nowadays, ayahuasca journeys are sort of like as commonplace as going for a Starbucks coffee or whatever. It's everybody's doing it. It's in the media. People are making films about it in the mainstream. Pop stars and movie stars are doing it. Ayahuasca is like, it's the new Coca-Cola, really. It's nothing special anymore. But what people are talking about is using tryptamines and ibogoids and beta carbolines and so on to redirect the energy in the brain to switch off certain filters, to switch off that static. And when you switch off the static, you can make new connections, some of which are already there. The one to your higher self, we can call it, is already there. But the fascinating thing about this fourth dimensional space is that there are other things there as well. Other things live there and have done for a very, very long time. Right. And it's a massive diversity, a massive ecology of different beings from different places with different expectations and different ambitions and different patterns of behavior. And that is so extraordinary and so alien to the regular human being, even the spiritual human being who is pushing into those realms, that a lot of those beings, particularly what we might call the positive ones, use archetypal images to make it understandable to us. So they will present themselves as jaguars or snakes or goddesses or demons or animals or whatever. And very often, interestingly, that is despite one's background, they will choose the archetypal resonance of the area. So again and again, you'll hear people who take ayahuasca, particularly in the Amazon or Brazil, Guatemala, wherever, will go to this place, take it, and see the archetypal images of that area that previously they'd never seen before, which is an indication that the resonance is dependent on the dominant feeling and the dominant expectations of the consciousness in that area, which I find fascinating.
Okay, well, we're about at the end of our first hour here, Neil. Where can people get a hold of your material? I know you have the audio cleaver out and got a fantastic website. Would you share that with us, please?
Sure, yeah. You can go to neilkramer.com, and there is basically a lot of essays and interviews and materials that people could spend an awfully long time going through if they so wish. There's also a store on there, the Audio Cleaver, Transitional Alchemy. There'll be some new projects going up there very soon, which people can take a look at. There's a book coming out soon that's in the pipeline. So yeah, there's a lot, but neilkramer.com, and you can get to other things from there, like Facebook updates and little kind of more domestic news items that people might want to take a look at. So neilkramer.com is the place.
Great. Well, thank you, and thank everybody for listening. We will be continuing with another hour in the archives, so after Brooks's show is over, why don't you pop on over and check out the second hour of our conversation with Neil.
No, I was just going to say the website is www.the100thmonkeysradio.com.
Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance, and we will talk to you guys later.